Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 3 of Star Wars Rebels called Droids in Distress. Overall, I was really pleased by this episode. It doesn't suffer from the problem of being the initial story. The initial story is all about getting all the pieces on the board and giving us a basic idea of who the characters are and what their deal is. But as it only had about 44 minutes to work with, it really had to go with the broad strokes, and we couldn't really flesh out the characters very much. So now that the burden of not being a pilot is taken away from the show, it can kind of really start going out there and getting into the heads of the various characters and giving us something to work with them as people. Another thing that this episode is out there to do is to basically start really more seriously tying Rebels, which remember is set only 5 years before the events of A New Hope, into the firm established canon of Star Wars. And this episode, of course, they go in what is a perfectly reasonable way of doing that by introducing us to canon characters, characters who've been in all the movies and who played prominent parts in Clone Wars, and of course that's R2-D2 and C-3PO. Being that they're droids and that they don't age, of course this makes perfect sense for them to be in that situation. And it also doesn't hurt that R2-D2 is in a lot of people's mind the unofficial mascot for Star Wars. I mean, he even ended up in the Star Wars Legacy comics, which were set something like 75 years after the Return of the Jedi, as a companion to Luke's great grandson Cade Skywalker. So yeah, it's really hard to go wrong with R2-D2 and C-3PO. And of course, once again, Anthony Daniels, the voice of C-3PO, stepping in to once again do the voice of C-3PO. I mean, he really is the guy who has been most consistently doing his character since the original Star Wars movies came out. Granted, it's just he's just doing the voice now. He's not actually in the suit, but still, that is certainly something to be admired. But anyway, let's kind of just get right into things and talk about the characters, and then we'll talk about some of the more bigger issues going on here. So this episode, I like how they take some time to kind of give everybody their little moments. Like, for example, Hera, we again get to see her being, sort of being the team mom, as she's been dubbed by the good folks over at TV Tropes, which is a very appropriate take for her. When she, her showing her kind of giving Ezra some of Zeb's backstory and helping to cement the bond between those two. Now Ezra kind of understands a little bit of where Zeb comes from. And remember, Zeb was the one who was sort of the most willing to throw Ezra under the bus in the earlier episodes, and he had kind of started to come around by the end. It's sort of this, and his the way he was teamed up with Sabine in this episode kind of gives me the sense that maybe Zeb is someone who likes younger people, who likes looking after younger people. But anyway, kind of getting back, but really that's about all we have from Hera. Nothing particular to say about Chopper, although I've been reading some of the interviews with the people behind the scenes who sort of said that if you can imagine R2-D2 as being like a dog, then imagine Chopper as being like a cat. And like the scene on the shuttle where Chopper is just kind of like poking at Ezra. Now granted, this is all part of the act, but it reminded me more than a little bit of how my cats are when I'm eating something and they're like, food, give me food. You want to give me food. Come on. So that was very well done. And of course, seeing Chopper interact with R2-D2 and C-3PO was really, really fun. It's always fun to just watch C-3PO and R2-D2 bicker and butt heads and and argue with each other. And if you enjoy that sort of thing, there's actually a video somebody made out there that's basically subtitles of what R2-D2 might have been saying to C-3PO, and if you watch that, it is absolutely hilarious. But then again, you didn't even need that for R2-D2 to be hilarious. I just never tire of the fact that he called C-3PO a mindless philosopher. That just really is gold in my book. But anyway, not a huge amount to say about Sabine either this episode, but we have shown, we do get to see here that, she's more than just the explosives expert. She's, a competent con woman, seems to have some fairly good social skills, knows how to work people. And I do appreciate that. It kind of, again, makes her a more rounded character and shows a side of her that, as somebody who's a Mandalorian, that you really wouldn't expect. Deception and trickery, that's really, really not in the Mandalorian playbook. They're very much, okay, let's strap on the armor, let's strap on the guns, and go shoot some people. Let's see. We don't really get a huge amount about what's going on with Kanan either. He's oddly reluctant to do anything that's going to help Ezra along with his Jedi training, and I have a pretty good idea of why that is. And from what I understand, they're going to get into that later on in the season, so I'll put that aside so as not to spoil anything. But he's a guy who, remember, he's been on the run from the Empire since he was Ezra's age. So basically, he's been on the run from the Emperor for like 15 years. So he's very comfortable in the skin, in this sort of Han Solo-esque scoundrel skin. And I love how he's sort of like, oh no, this isn't arms dealing, this is weapons redistribution. He's very comfortable with these little lies and justifications that he has to tell himself in order to sort of maintain this life, so very different than the ideals of the Jedi in which he was raised. But we do see that, he's not become completely unreasonable about this. It's just, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there. But anyway, we do get to see some nice moments with him. Like at the very end, he agrees, like, okay, Ezra, we're finally going to start your Jedi training. And then he recognizes that quote at the end. How'd it go? A single act of kindness can spread. A single act can spread kindness throughout the galaxy, or something along those lines. Now that's actually somewhat reminiscent of a quote from Jace Malcolm, who was a famous soldier thousands and thousands of years before these episodes, and of course one of the characters in Star Wars: The Old Republic, the MMO, which I do play and I love dearly, where he goes, let's see, a single spark of courage can ignite the fires of hope and restore peace across the galaxy. Now, I love the fact that he uses the word spark because, well, what was the title of the last episode? Spark of Rebellion. Spark of Rebellion. A New Hope. And of course, the person he's talking to there at the end is Bale Organa, but we'll get to him in a bit. I want to finish talking about the crew of the Ghost, and that brings us to Ezra. Now, this episode, again, when he's jumping across the roost, reminds us that Ezra did not know until recently that he was Force sensitive, but that he had already started learning how to, just through his own natural abilities, how to tap into the Force a little bit. That's basically Force jump, is how that particular Jedi ability that he seems very well versed in is called. And here when he throws Agent Kallus using telekinesis. Well, again, moving stuff using telekinesis is a very classic Jedi thing. So it is understandable that he now that he understands what's going on here, that he really wants to get into this. So it does show you that he really does have that potential, and perhaps has even more potential than Kanan has given him credit for. I mean, he knows that Ezra is strong in the Force, but the ability to just sort of do things like that spontaneously, well, that's not really something the Jedi consider to be really, it's like, common. People like doing things like that is really, well, it is, as as we see from Kanan, it's the sort of thing that really surprises Jedi. Jedi generally tend to assume that people who are Force sensitive are probably not going to be able to do much of anything without some real training. And if they are able to do anything, it's just going to be like with Ezra, just purely unconscious, something that they don't even realize they're doing. So that's going to be interesting to see how well he deals with that. Now, of course, the big characterization for this episode was saved for Zeb. We start to learn more about his people, that they were basically virtually exterminated by the Empire. Agent Kallus was the one that sort of spearheaded that. He flips out when he sees Kallus wielding the bow rifle, which I thought was the name of a Wookiee weapon, but okay, whatever. And kind of says that those are, only allowed to be used by members of the Royal Guard, which possibly hints at, who Zeb might have been before all of this happened. And so again, that was a really nice way to start explaining like why we haven't seen Zeb's people before, and of course why he has such a mad-on for the Empire. And of course, Zeb's people are not the first species that the Empire has put to the sword. So it also is a nice way of highlighting just how evil the Empire is. Now, Agent Kallus, again, just the fact that this guy is basically like laughing about having helped in committing mass genocide, it really shows just how horribly awful a person he is. Not that we particularly needed it, but it does really go a long way in showing you just how the evil of the Empire has gone in indoctrinating some people. Now remember, Kallus is somebody who would have been the first generation of people really raised in the philosophy of the Empire, and he's a perfect example of what sort of monsters these ideas can turn people into. But again, he continues to show himself to be a pretty clever guy, extremely ruthless. Now granted, he didn't find out where they were. He found out where the rebels were because C-3PO called him. But Kallus knew exactly what he needed to do in order to lure Zeb out there and, if it hadn't been for Ezra, kill him. Which would have been a major loss to the crew of the Ghost. So again, Kallus is a smart guy. And I was reading a bit about him over on the Star Wars wiki, and apparently some of the initial designs for him toyed with the idea of him being a Chiss. Now, Kallus is a member of the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. He's an agent for them. And if you're familiar with Star Wars: The Old Republic, one of the things that you can be is basically an Imperial agent, an agent of the Empire. And one of the species that you can play in that game is the Chiss. And honestly, like my Imperial agent is a Chiss. And honestly, I think this story works better if your character is a Chiss. They have special dialogue that you can only access if you are a Chiss. And like, just overall, the story feels better. So I'm actually genuinely a little disappointed they didn't kind of go with the Chiss route with him. But Okay, I'd really have to go off on a major ramble that people who are really, really not into the expanded universe of Star Wars would understand. People who are just kind of coming into this cold would have no clue as to what I was going on about, so we're just going to leave it at that. But yeah, seriously, people, if you play an Imperial agent in the Old Republic, play as a Chiss. And let me see here. Anything else? Oh yeah, we need to talk about Bale Organa. Well, of course, Bale Organa is Princess Leia's adoptive father. He's also one of the founders of the Rebel Alliance with Mon Mothma and Graham Bill Iblis. Probably not saying that right. But yeah, they're kind of in the original Star Wars lore, they were the three big people who were responsible for getting the rebellion off the ground. And I guess you could maybe add Galen Merrick and Juno Eclipse in there if you really wanted to, but anyway. So here we see him making an appearance, giving Kanan some money, and throwing that Jedi proverb at him. Now remember, Clone Wars, Bale had become a friend of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He was basically the kind of person that helped Yoda escape from the Jedi Temple after Order 66 was declared. So, and it's kind of in the expanded universe. There was that Obi-Wan and Organa kind of kept in touch with each other discreetly while Obi-Wan was on Tatooine watching over Luke Skywalker as he grew up. And remember, Luke Skywalker's about 15 years old when this episode is happening. So, that's where Obi-Wan is. He's just hanging out in that hut in Tatooine. But the idea of possibly Bale being somebody who could provide some financial support for these guys in the future, that's an intriguing possibility. It would bring the crew of the Ghost into to having much closer ties with the start of the rebellion proper. Of course, it has been said that these guys are not basically going to be the founders of the rebellion. I have a feeling they're probably going to still leave it at being, Bale, Mon Mothma, and Graham in the new Star Wars continuity. But the idea that the Ghost crew might have been out there helping make it happen, that I can believe. Oh yeah, one thing that I also wanted to mention before I signed off is I love the droid that was piloting the shuttle, because if I remember right, it looks exactly like the droid that you see in the Star Tours ride. If you've ever been to like the theme park where they have the Star Tours ride, the droid looks exactly like that, and I've been on that at least once or twice in my life, so I got an enormous kick out of that. Let me see, anything else? Nope, nothing coming to mind, guys. Again, now that they have the burden of the getting all the characters introduced, now they can really start fleshing these guys out, really start going somewhere with the story, and this episode does a really, really nice job in doing that. I'm very excited to see what's going to be happening next week. So, with that said, everybody, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.